The evening sky over Vareth Prime turned purple as 3 suns began their descent beyond the Crystal Mountains. High Priestess Yura stood at the temple steps, her blue skin glowing softly in the fading light. Around her, thousands of Vareth gathered for evening prayers, their voices rising in harmonious chants that had echoed through these sacred halls for 10,000 years. Yura closed her eyes and felt the peace of her world. The Vareth were a gentle people. They built temples instead of fortresses. They studied meditation instead of war. Their faith in the eternal light had protected them since the beginning of their civilization. Or so they believed. The first explosion shattered the sky. Yura's eyes snapped open. A massive fireball bloomed on the horizon where the capital city stood. Then another, and another. The ground trembled beneath her feet. The singing stopped. Confusion rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. "What is happening?" someone whispered. The answer came in the form of shadows. Enormous warships descended through the clouds, blotting out the suns. They were dark and angular, covered in weapons that sparked with deadly energy. The Varath had never seen ships like these. They had never seen any ships designed purely for killing. Taman, the young commander of the temple guard, ran up the steps. His face was pale with terror. "Priestess, we are under attack. The Kral Dominion has come." Yura felt her heart freeze. Everyone knew of the Kral. They were legends whispered in the dark, stories told to frighten children. A race of reptilian conquerors who swept across the galaxy, destroying everything in their path. Entire civilizations vanished when the Kral arrived. But Vareth Prime was far from the main trade routes. They were peaceful. They had nothing worth taking. "Why would they come here?" Yura asked, though she already knew the answer. The Kral did not need reasons. They conquered because they could. More explosions lit the sky. The temple's communication system crackled to life with desperate voices. Cities were burning. The small Varath defense fleet, little more than patrol ships, was being torn apart in orbit. Civilians were fleeing into the wilderness, but there was nowhere to hide. Taman grabbed Yura's arm. "We must evacuate the temple. They will come here next." But where could they go? The temple was the largest structure for 100 miles. If it was not safe, nowhere was. Already families were flooding through the gates, carrying children and clutching sacred texts. They looked to Yura with desperate hope in their eyes. She wanted to tell them everything would be fine. She wanted to say the eternal light would protect them. But the words stuck in her throat as she watched a Kral gunship strafe a residential district, turning homes into rubble. Hours passed like a nightmare. The Kral moved with terrible efficiency. Their ground forces landed in massive dropships, disgorging thousands of soldiers in dark armor. The Vareth military tried to fight, but they had no experience with real war. Their weapons were ceremonial. Their tactics were designed for parades, not battles. They died in minutes. Yura organized the refugees as best she could. The temple had food and water, but not enough. Not for this many. Not for long. Children cried in the halls. Parents whispered prayers that grew more desperate with each passing hour. Taman returned from a scouting mission, his uniform torn and bloody. "They are coming this way. They kill everyone they find. Men, women, children. It does not matter to them." "We will fight," one of the guards said, raising his ceremonial spear. Taman looked at the weapon and shook his head. "That will not stop them. Nothing will stop them." Night fell, but the sky remained bright with fires. Yura climbed to the temple's highest tower and looked out over her dying world. Smoke rose from 1,000 burning buildings. The beautiful gardens were trampled. The meditation pools ran red with blood. This was the end of everything she had ever known. She fell to her knees and prayed. She prayed harder than she had ever prayed in her life. She begged the eternal light for salvation, for mercy, for a miracle. But the heavens remained silent. The fires kept burning. The screaming continued. "The gods have abandoned us," she whispered. Her faith, the foundation of her entire existence, crumbled like sand. Below, Kral's soldiers reached the temple gates. They did not bother with demands or negotiations. They simply opened fire. The ancient wooden gates exploded inward. Guards died trying to hold them back with spears against plasma rifles. It was slaughter, not battle. Taman grabbed a communication device and sent out one last desperate message on all frequencies. "This is Varath Prime. We are under attack by the Kral Dominion. If anyone can hear this, please help us. Please. We are dying. Our world is dying." He knew no one would answer. No one challenged the Kral. No one had ever survived their conquest, but he sent the message anyway, again and again, even as the enemy stormed through the temple halls. Yura descended from the tower. If this was the end, she would face it with her people. She would not hide while they died. She walked to the main hall where hundreds of Varath huddled together, holding their children close. Kral soldiers burst through the doors, weapons raised. Yura stepped forward, spreading her arms. "We are unarmed. We are no threat to you. Please let the children live." The Kral commander laughed. It was a horrible sound, like rocks grinding together. He raised his weapon. Then the sky screamed. Everyone froze. That sound, it was not from the Kral ships. It was something else, something new. Yura looked up through the shattered temple roof and saw them. Streaks of fire falling from the clouds like meteors. Dozens of them, hundreds. They fell with such speed and violence that the air itself seemed to tear. The Kral soldiers looked up too, confusion replacing their certainty. The streaks grew closer, and now Yura could see they were not meteors. They were pods. Drop pods, and they were heading straight for the temple grounds. The first pod hit the earth with a thunderous crash that shook the entire building. Then another, and another. The ground became a field of impact craters, dust and debris filling the air. The Kral soldiers raised their weapons toward this new threat. The pods opened with explosive force, and from within, demons emerged. The creatures that emerged from the drop pods stood like nightmares made real. They wore armor so black it seemed to drink the light, covered with white markings that depicted skulls and demons and symbols Yura could not understand. Their helmets had no faces, only dark visors that glowed red like burning coals. They moved with deadly purpose, weapons raised, scanning the area with mechanical precision. The Kral soldiers opened fire immediately. Plasma bolts lit up the darkness, striking the newcomers. But these warriors did not fall. Their armor absorbed the shots, and they kept advancing, kept coming, like death itself could not stop them. Then they returned fire. The sound was deafening. Their weapons roared with a fury that made Kral plasma rifles sound like whispers. The lead Kral soldier exploded in a spray of purple blood. His companions scrambled for cover, but there was none. The black-armored warriors moved with terrifying coordination, their weapons cutting through Kral defenses like they were paper. One of the warriors stepped forward, taller than the others. His armor bore marks and scratches from countless battles, and white tally marks ran down his shoulder plate. Hundreds of them. He pointed at the Kral position and spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "Contact! Multiple hostiles! Engage and eliminate!" His soldiers moved like a machine. They spread out in a pattern the Varath had never seen, covering angles and providing support with practiced ease. These were not ceremonial guards. These were killers who knew their craft. A Kral warrior tried to flank them, his massive reptilian form moving with surprising speed. One of the black soldiers, smaller than the others, intercepted him. She carried no rifle, only a long knife that gleamed in the firelight. The Kral warrior was twice her size and armed with an energy blade. It did not matter. She moved like water, flowing around his strike and driving her knife into the gap between his armor plates. The Kral warrior roared and swung again. She ducked, kicked his knee backward with a sickening crack, and as he fell, she drove the knife into his throat. It was over in seconds. Yura watched from the temple doorway, her mind struggling to understand what she was seeing. These warriors fought with a savagery that shocked her. The Vareth avoided violence. They believed in peace and harmony, but these creatures embraced war like it was breathing. The tall warrior approached the temple, his weapon still raised. Taman stepped in front of Yura, his ceremonial spear shaking in his hands. "Stay back," he said, though his voice trembled. The warrior stopped. He reached up and removed his helmet with a hiss of pressure. The face beneath was not reptilian like the Kral. It was smooth and symmetrical, with dark hair and scarred skin. His eyes were hard and tired, the eyes of someone who had seen too much death. "We received your distress call," he said in heavily accented Varath. "I am Captain Hyun of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. We are here to help." "Terran?" Yura had never heard the word. "What are Terrans?" "Humans," Hyun said. "From Earth. We heard your transmission and came as fast as we could." Taman lowered his spear slightly. "You came to help us? But why? We have nothing to offer you." Hyun's scarred face hardened. "We do not help people because they can pay us. We help because it is right." He looked past them into the temple at the huddled refugees. "Get your people to safety. We will handle the Kral." More explosions echoed from the city. The Kral were not retreating. If anything, they were sending more forces. Yura could see dropships landing in the distance, deploying hundreds of soldiers. The humans were outnumbered 10-1. "There are too many of them," she said. "You cannot fight them all." Hyun smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Watch us." He replaced his helmet and turned to his soldiers. "Minho, take your squad and set up the welcome party. Jiwon, I need you on overwatch. Doyun, get medical ready for civilian casualties. Everyone else, you know the drill. Make them afraid." The human named Minho grinned behind his helmet. "Yes, sir. Time to play some music." The humans moved with incredible speed, disappearing into the ruins around the temple. For a few minutes, everything was quiet. The Kral advance continued, their soldiers moving in tight formations toward the temple. They expected easy prey. They expected victims who would run and hide. They got something very different. The music started first. It blasted from speakers the humans had set up, a horrible, violent sound of screaming guitars and pounding drums. The Kral formation hesitated, confused by this bizarre tactic. Then the shooting started. But it was not random. The humans had turned the temple grounds into a killing field. Every avenue of approach had been prepared. Mines exploded under Kral feet. Hidden gunners opened fire from unexpected angles. When the Kral turned to face one threat, another appeared behind them. Yura watched in horror and fascination as the humans fought. They did not stand and trade shots. They moved constantly, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. They used the terrain, the darkness, even the bodies of fallen enemies as cover. They were not stronger than the Kral. They were not better armed, but they were smarter, faster, and far more ruthless. A group of Kral soldiers tried to take cover in a ruined building. Minho and his squad were waiting inside. The Kral entered and never came out. When the shooting stopped, Minho's voice came over the communication system, calm and professional. "Building clear. 12 enemies down. Moving to next position." The battle raged for hours. The Kral kept sending more soldiers, but the humans kept killing them. They used tactics the Kral had never encountered. Ambushes, traps, psychological warfare. The music never stopped, driving the Kral into confused fury. High above, the female warrior named Jiwon lay on a rooftop with a long rifle. She watched the battlefield through her scope, firing with mechanical precision. One shot, one kill. Her voice was quiet when she spoke. "Command, I have eyes on enemy command position. Request permission to engage. Hyun's voice crackled back. Granted. Send them a message. Ji-won's rifle spoke once. 2 kilometers away, a Kral commander's head exploded. His officers scattered in panic. Ji-won was already tracking the next target. Her rifle spoke again, and again. Each time a Kral leader fell. As dawn approached, the Kral assault faltered. They had lost hundreds of soldiers and gained nothing. The temple still stood, the humans still fought. And now Kral commanders were dying from invisible threats they could not stop. Taemin stood beside Yura, watching in disbelief. What kind of beings are these humans? They fight like demons? Yura had no answer. She had prayed for salvation, for divine intervention. Instead, devils had fallen from the sky. Devils who killed with efficiency and fought with a joy that terrified her. But these devils were protecting her people, dying to save strangers they had never met. A young human medic named Doyun approached the temple, carrying a wounded Vareth child. His armor was splattered with blood, both purple and red. He set the child down gently and immediately began treating her injuries with supplies from his pack. "You are hurt," Yura said, noticing the blood seeping from his side. Doyun glanced down. Just a scratch. The kid needed help first. He smiled at the frightened child, his face kind, despite the violence around them. "You are going to be okay, little one. I promise." Yura felt something crack inside her chest. These warriors, these demons who killed with such terrible skill, they also saved with equal passion. They were contradictions made flesh, monsters and heroes at the same time. Above the planet, warning sirens began to wail. The Kral fleet had had enough. If they could not win on the ground, they would destroy the entire world. Orbital bombardment cannons began to charge, preparing to turn Vareth Prime into glass. Captain Hyun received the warning and looked up at the sky. His voice was calm when he spoke to his soldiers. "Well, that is unfortunate. Looks like we need Plan B. Someone get Fleet Command on the line. Tell them it is time." The Kral orbital bombardment cannons glowed with deadly energy, preparing to rain fire on Vareth Prime. In the command deck of the flagship, the Kral admiral watched the ground forces retreat and felt satisfaction. If they could not have this world, no one would. Then his sensors officer made a confused sound. "Admiral, we have multiple contacts emerging from the outer system. Unknown vessels approaching at high speed." The admiral leaned forward. "Identification? They are broadcasting Terran signals, human vessels." The admiral laughed. He had heard of humans. They were a young race, barely spacefaring. Their ships were small and primitive. "How many?" 43 capital ships, Admiral, plus fighters and support craft." The laughter died. 43 ships was not a small force, but Kral vessels were larger, more powerful. This would be a brief fight. "All ships, engage the human fleet. Destroy them." In the cockpit of her fighter, pilot So-min checked her weapons one last time. Around her, hundreds of human fighters launched from carrier ships, forming up in attack wings. The Kral dreadnoughts loomed ahead like mountains in space, bristling with weapons. "All wings, this is So-min. Remember your training. Stay fast, stay low, and make every shot count. These bastards want to burn a planet full of civilians. Let us show them what happens when you threaten the innocent." Her squadron mates replied with various acknowledgments, some professional, some crude. They were scared. She was scared. The Kral ships outgunned them in every way. But fear was just another feeling, and So-min had learned to ignore it years ago. "Wings away! Hit them hard!" The fighters accelerated, closing the distance at incredible speed. The Kral opened fire with point defense weapons, filling space with streams of plasma. Fighters exploded left and right. So-min jinked and weaved, her training taking over. She did not think. She just flew. A Kral cruiser filled her view. She armed her missiles and locked onto the engine cluster. The target indicator turned red. She fired. The missiles streaked away, and she pulled hard to avoid the ship's defensive fire. Behind her, the missiles struck home. The cruiser's engines exploded, sending it spinning out of control. Hit confirmed, moving to next target. All across the battlefield, human fighters swarmed the Kral fleet like angry insects. They were too small for the big guns to track effectively, too fast for the point defense systems to catch them all. They targeted engines, weapons, sensors. Death by 1,000 cuts. But the Kral were not helpless. Their fighters launched, larger and more heavily armed than the human craft. Salman found herself in a turning fight with a Kral pilot, both of them trying to get into firing position. Her ship groaned under the strain of hard maneuvers. Sweat poured down her face. The Kral pilot was good, but Salman was better. She pulled a move her instructor had called suicide, cutting her engines and letting momentum carry her forward while rotating her ship. The Kral fighter shot past her. She fired. It exploded in a ball of flame and debris. Splash one. On the human capital ships, the battle was just as intense. Lieutenant J stood in the boarding pod with 30 Marines, all checking weapons and armor. Their mission was simple and insane. Board the Kral flagship and disable the orbital bombardment system from inside. 1 minute to launch, the pilot announced. Jay looked at his Marines. Most were young, barely into their 20s. They all knew this was probably a one-way trip, but not one of them had hesitated to volunteer. Listen up, Jay said. We are going into that ship and we are going to raise hell. Fight smart, fight together, and watch each other's backs. We might not all come home, but we will make sure those Kral bastards remember us. The Marines shouted their approval. The boarding pod launched, rocketing toward the massive Kral flagship. Point defense fire filled the space around them, but the pod's armor held. They struck the hull with bone-rattling force, and explosive charges blew a hole through the thick metal. Jay was first through, his rifle already firing. Kral soldiers in the corridor died before they could react. The Marines poured through behind him, securing the breach point with brutal efficiency. Move! 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 We have to reach the weapons control deck before they lock us out. They fought deck by deck, corridor by corridor. The Kral had every advantage. This was their ship, their territory. They knew the layout and had superior numbers, but the humans had desperation and fury. They used grenades in enclosed spaces, turned corners firing, and never gave the Kral a moment to organize. One Marine fell, then another. Jay kept them moving. If they stopped, they died. If they slowed, they failed. The only way was forward. On the surface, Yura watched the sky light up with explosions. The space battle raged above, too far to see clearly, but close enough to feel. Each flash might be a human ship dying, might be brave souls sacrificing themselves for people they did not know. Captain Hyun stood beside her, watching calmly. Your people should evacuate the temple. If we fail up there, this place will be the first target. If you fail, there is nowhere safe, Yura replied. She looked at him. Why are you doing this? Why risk so much for us? Hyun was quiet for a moment. Then he removed his helmet again, letting her see his scarred face. A long time ago, my world was attacked too. We were not ready. We had no defenders, no one to help us. Billions died before we learned to fight back. We swore that day that no other species would suffer alone. If there are people in danger, we come. It is what we do. But you fight like demons. You kill without hesitation. Yes, Hyun said simply, because hesitation gets good people killed. We learned that the hard way. Peace is a beautiful thing, priestess, but it only exists because someone is willing to be a monster to protect it. Above them, Somin's fighter took a hit. Alarms screamed as systems failed. She was losing power, spiraling toward the planet. But she had one missile left, and ahead of her was the Kral flagship's shield generator. This is Somin. I am hit and going down. Making last run on primary target. Negative, Somin. Eject, and we will pick you up. She smiled. No time. Tell my family I flew well. She cut communications and aimed her dying fighter at the shield generator. The missile fired, and a second later, she followed it. Her fighter struck the generator at full speed, and the explosion lit up the sky. The flagship's shields collapsed. Shields down, Jay's communication officer reported. All boarders, the door is open. Jay and his remaining Marines reached the weapons control deck. Kral technicians scrambled for weapons, but they were not soldiers. The Marines cut them down and sealed the door. Explosions rocked the corridor outside as Kral reinforcements tried to break through. We have maybe 2 minutes, Jay said. Get that system offline. His tech specialist went to work, fingers flying over the alien controls. It is not shutting down. The system has lockouts. I would need hours to bypass them. Jay looked at the massive machinery around them. Then we do it the old way. Everyone, plant your charges. We are blowing this whole section. They worked fast, placing explosive packs on every critical system. Outside, the door began to glow red as Kral soldiers cut through with plasma torches. Charges set. We are ready. The door exploded inward. Kral soldiers poured through, weapons blazing. Jay and his Marines returned fire, but they were overwhelmed. One by one, they fell. Jay took 3 shots to the chest, his armor cracking. He fell to his knees. With the last of his strength, he pressed the detonator. The weapons deck exploded in a massive fireball. The flagship shuddered, and every orbital bombardment cannon went offline. The Kral admiral stared in disbelief as his screens showed critical damage. Above the planet, the human fleet pressed their advantage. With the flagship crippled, the Kral formation broke. Ships tried to retreat, but the humans pursued. They showed no mercy. Every Kral vessel that remained was a threat. The flagship began to list, fires burning through multiple decks. The admiral gave the order to abandon ship, and escape pods began launching. The human fleet let them go. They wanted the Kral to spread the word. By dawn, the battle was over. The Kral fleet was destroyed or fled. Vareth Prime was safe, but the cost was terrible. Thousands of humans had died, including Somin, Jay, and countless others whose names Yura would never know. She found Captain Hyun standing in the ruins of the temple, looking at a list of casualties on his datapad. His face was carved from stone. So many dead, Yura whispered. All for us. All for what is right, Hyun corrected. They knew the cost. They paid it willingly. A communication came through. Taman rushed over, his eyes wide. Captain, we received a strange signal. It is old, automated. It contains coordinates and a message. The cradle must not fall. Hyun frowned. The cradle? What is that? We do not know. But the signal came from deep space, from somewhere the Kral controlled for centuries. Yura felt a chill. They had won this battle, but something told her the war was just beginning. The coordinates led them to a place where stars went to die. A red giant sun burned weakly in the center of an empty system, its light the color of old blood. Nothing lived here, nothing grew. It was a tomb among the stars. Captain Hyun stood on the bridge of the human ship Defiance, the captured and renamed Kral flagship. Beside him, Priestess Yura stared at the massive structure floating in orbit around the dying sun. It was larger than any station she had ever seen, built from black metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered its surface, worn by countless centuries. "What is this place?" she asked. "Scanning now," the sensor officer reported. "The structure is ancient, at least 3,000 years old. It is massive, Captain. Hundreds of levels. Life support is still functioning in some sections. And I am reading biological signatures, thousands of them." Hyun frowned. "Life? Out here?" "In stasis, sir. The entire structure appears to be a prison or storage facility. Yura felt her blood run cold. A prison. Built by who? For what purpose? The automated message had said the cradle must not fall. But fall to whom? "We are going in," Hyun decided. "Prepare a boarding team. Full gear. We do not know what we will find in there." An hour later, Yura found herself walking through corridors that had not seen visitors in millennia. The human marines moved around her, weapons ready, scanning every shadow. The air was cold and stale, recycled by ancient machines that somehow still functioned. They found the first chamber deep in the structure's heart. The doors opened with a hiss, and everyone stopped. Before them stretched a vast hall filled with thousands of stasis pods. Each pod held a being, frozen in time, their faces peaceful in artificial sleep. "By the light," Yura whispered. "Who are they?" The human medical officer, Yoonji, approached one of the pods and checked its readings. "This one is from a species I do not recognize." "The pod shows she has been in stasis for 273 years. The others vary. Some have been here for over 1,000 years." They moved through the chamber, checking pod after pod. Each held someone different species, different worlds. But they all had one thing in common. According to the pod records, they were all conquered by the Crawl. "This is a trophy collection," Hyun said, his voice hard with anger. "The Crawl kept their victims here like prizes." Yura felt sick. How many worlds had fallen? How many civilizations had been destroyed, their last survivors locked in these pods, preserved as monuments to Crawl victory? "Captain," Yoonji called out, "these stasis systems are failing. The power cells are degrading. If we do not do something, everyone in here will die within a few months." Hyun looked at the thousands of pods stretching into the darkness. "Can we revive them?" "Some of them. Maybe half. The others have been frozen too long or their pods are too damaged. But it will take time and resources we barely have." "Then we start now," Hyun ordered. "Begin with the ones in the best condition. We save everyone we can." Over the following weeks, they worked tirelessly. Yoonji and her medical team revived pod after pod, bringing beings back from their frozen sleep. Each revival was different. Some woke screaming, remembering the moment they were captured. Others woke quietly, confused by the passage of time. One of the first they revived was a massive warrior named Kanor. His species, the Valen, stood over 7 feet tall with gray skin and eyes like burning amber. He had been in stasis for 300 years. When he woke, he immediately tried to fight, thinking the humans were Crawl. It took 6 Marines to restrain him before Yura could explain. When Kanor finally understood, he collapsed to his knees and wept. 300 years? My world, my family, they are all gone." "We do not know that," Yura said gently. "We will help you find out. But first, we need your help. Tell us about this place. Who built it?" Kanor wiped his eyes and stood. "The architects built it, an ancient race that existed before the Crawl. They tried to stop the Crawl advance but failed. This place was meant to preserve the fallen, a museum of lost civilizations. The Crawl took it over when the architects died out." "Why keep prisoners alive?" Hyun asked. "Because the Crawl do not serve themselves," Kanor said bitterly. "They serve the hierarchy." The word sent a chill through everyone present. Yura had never heard of the hierarchy, but something in Kanor's voice spoke of terror beyond understanding. "What is the hierarchy?" Hyun asked. Kanor sat down heavily. "The hierarchy is a collection of ancient species who believe younger races exist only to serve them. They are old beyond measure and powerful beyond reason. The Crawl are just their servants, their enforcers. They conquer worlds and present the survivors to the hierarchy as tribute or slaves." "Why have we never heard of them?" Yura asked. "Because they hide in the shadows," Kanor explained. "They let races like the Crawl be the face of conquest while they remain unseen. By the time you learn about the hierarchy, it is too late. Your world is already theirs. Hyun's jaw tightened. How do we fight them? Kanor laughed, but there was no humor in it. You cannot. No one can. My people tried. We had a fleet of 10,000 ships, warriors trained from birth. The hierarchy sent one vessel. One. It destroyed our fleet and cracked our homeworld in half. I only survived because I was captured before the final battle. Silence fell over the group. Yura felt her newfound hope crumbling. They had barely survived the Krall. How could they face something that made the Krall look weak? But Hyun stepped forward. Your people fought alone. You did not have allies. That is going to change. Over the following months, they revived more survivors. Each one brought stories of fallen worlds and destroyed civilizations, but they also brought knowledge, skills, and a burning desire for revenge. Slowly, an alliance formed. Yura found herself at the center of it. The survivors looked to her as a symbol, a priestess who had lost faith and found it again in action rather than prayer. She organized councils, mediated disputes, and helped bind the disparate groups together. The humans provided training. Minho taught urban combat tactics to species who had never held weapons. Jiwon showed them how to use terrain and surprise. Doyun taught field medicine. The ancient temple on Vareth Prime became a war academy, where pacifists learned to become warriors. But it was Kanor who provided the most crucial information. He knew the hierarchy's tactics, their weaknesses. He had studied them for centuries in his pod, his mind never truly sleeping. They rely on fear, he explained during a council meeting. They make you believe resistance is hopeless, but they are not invincible. They are old, set in their ways. They do not adapt well to new tactics. Like the Krall, Hyun said thoughtfully. They expected easy victories on Vareth Prime. We gave them a war instead. Exactly. The hierarchy will come when they learn what happened here. They will send a fleet to crush this rebellion before it spreads. We need to be ready. Yura stood. Then we prepare. We train. We unite every species the Krall have wronged. We become strong enough to stand against the darkness. Around her, representatives from a dozen species nodded. They had been victims. They had been broken and stored like trophies, but they were victims no more. The training intensified. Ships were repaired and retrofitted with combined technology. Vareth telepaths learned to coordinate fleet movements. Valen warriors taught close-quarters combat. Human engineers showed them tricks to maximize limited resources. Months passed. The alliance grew stronger. But they all knew it was only a matter of time. Then the warning came. A scout ship detected a massive fleet entering the system. Hundreds of vessels, each one ancient and powerful. The hierarchy had arrived, and they were not pleased. A message broadcast across all frequencies. The voice was cold and emotionless, like the void between stars. You have interfered with hierarchy property. You have freed tribute that was rightfully ours. Surrender immediately, and we will grant you quick deaths. Resist, and we will make your suffering last millennia. On the Bridge of Defiance, Hyun listened to the message and smiled. It was not a kind smile. He opened a channel and responded. This is Captain Hyun of the Terran Colonial Defense Force, speaking on behalf of the Free Coalition. We do not surrender. We do not bow. You want a war? Come and get one. He closed the channel and turned to his crew. All ships, battle stations. This is what we trained for. Time to show these ancient bastards that the galaxy belongs to the living, not the dead. Let us make them remember this day. Across the fleet, alarms rang. Ships moved into formation. Warriors checked weapons one last time. Yura stood in the command center, her hands clasped in prayer. But this time, she was not praying for salvation from above. She was praying for strength from within. The hierarchy fleet advanced. The battle for the cradle was about to begin. The hierarchy fleet hung in space like a wall of death. Their ships were ancient beyond measure, built with technology that predated most known civilizations. They moved with slow certainty, confident in their power. They had crushed 1,000 rebellions. This would be no different. They were wrong. The Free Coalition fleet looked pitiful in comparison. A patchwork of vessels from a dozen species, repaired with salvaged parts and held together by determination. Human destroyers flew alongside Varath science ships. Valen warcraft moved in formation with captured Kral cruisers. They were outnumbered 3-1, outgunned in every way that mattered. But they had something the hierarchy did not expect. They had hope. On Varath Prime, Yura stood before the great temple, now converted into a command center. Around her, thousands gathered. Varath, humans, Valen, and others. Species that had been enemies, victims, strangers. Now they stood together. She raised her voice, and it carried across the crowd. Before this war, I believed in faith without action. I prayed for protection and waited for the gods to save us. But the gods did not come. Instead, devils fell from the sky. Warriors who fought with terrible fury and saved us with equal passion. They taught me that faith without strength is merely hope, and hope alone cannot stop darkness. She looked up at the sky where the fleets prepared to clash. Today we face an enemy that believes we are beneath them. They think we exist only to serve, to be conquered, to be broken. They are wrong. We are the answer to our own prayers. We are the strength we needed. And today, we show them that the galaxy belongs to the free, not to tyrants who hide in shadows. The crowd roared their approval. On every ship, in every station, beings who had been victims prepared to become warriors. Captain Hyun stood on the Bridge of Defiance, watching the hierarchy fleet advance. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But they did not falter. "All ships," he transmitted. "Remember the plan. We cannot match them in firepower, so we do not try. We make them chase us. We make them angry. We turn this battle into chaos. The hierarchy relies on order and superiority. We give them neither." Acknowledgements came from across the fleet. Minho commanded a strike group of fast attack ships. Jiwon led the fighter wings. Doyen coordinated rescue operations for damaged vessels. Every human knew their role. The hierarchy ships opened fire. Beams of pure energy lanced across space, striking coalition vessels. Shields flared and died. Ships exploded. In the first 30 seconds, they lost 10% of their fleet. But the coalition did not break. They scattered, each group moving to pre-planned positions. The hierarchy ships tried to pursue, but the coalition was too fast, too unpredictable. Human ships would appear, fire, and vanish before the hierarchy could target them properly. Valen warriors led boarding actions on isolated enemy vessels. Varath telepaths coordinated movements with precision the enemy could not match. On Defiance, Hyun coordinated the chaos like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Minho, hit that cruiser's engines. Jiwon, I need you to clear those fighters. Kanor, your warriors ready for boarding action?" Kanor's voice came back, filled with savage joy. "We have been ready for 300 years." The battle raged for hours. The hierarchy fleet was powerful, but the coalition was creative. Every tactic the ancients expected was countered by something new. When hierarchy ships formed defensive walls, coalition fighters slipped between them. When they tried to focus fire, their targets scattered and regrouped. But slowly, inevitably, the coalition was losing. For every hierarchy ship destroyed, they lost 3. The numbers did not lie. Without a miracle, they would be overwhelmed. Then the hierarchy flagship made its move. It was a massive vessel, older than some stars, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. It began charging its main cannon, a weapon that would wipe out half the coalition fleet in a single shot. "Target the flagship," Hyun ordered. "Everyone, concentrate fire on that ship." The coalition fleet turned. every weapon firing at the hierarchy flagship. But its shields were too strong. The attacks barely scratched it. The main cannon continued charging, building to a release that would end the battle. Jiwan saw the problem from her fighter's cockpit. The flagship was invulnerable from the outside, but every ship had weak points from within. She thought of Soman, who had sacrificed herself to take down the Kral's shields. She thought of Jay, who had destroyed the bombardment systems from inside. She made her choice. "This is Jiwan to all fighters. Follow my lead. We are going in." "Negative." Hyun's voice cracked over the communication. "Jiwan, that is suicide." "So was coming here in the first place," she replied. "But we came anyway. Captain, that cannon is going to kill thousands. I can stop it. Let me do my job." There was a long pause. Then Hyun's voice came back, thick with emotion. "Fly well, Jiwon. See you on the other side." Jiwon led her fighter wing straight at the flagship. Point defense fire filled space, tearing through her squadron. Fighters exploded left and right. She did not look back. She could not afford to. The flagship's hangar bay loomed ahead. She punched through the energy shield and into the hangar, her fighter screaming with damage. Behind her, 5 other fighters made it through. 6 fighters against a ship crewed by thousands. They opened fire the moment they landed, strafing the hangar and setting fuel lines ablaze. Hierarchy soldiers rushed to respond, but the human pilots were already out of their fighters, running deeper into the ship. Jiwan led them through corridors, following the massive power conduits that fed the main cannon. Hierarchy warriors appeared at every junction, their ancient weapons cutting down her pilots one by one. But they kept moving, kept fighting. By the time they reached the cannon's power core, Jiwan was alone. Her armor was cracked, her rifle empty, but she still had grenades. She placed them on the core, setting the timers. A hierarchy commander appeared, towering over her. "Foolish child, you cannot stop us. We are eternal." Jiwan smiled through her cracked helmet. "Nothing is eternal. You are about to learn that." The grenades detonated. The power core exploded, sending a cascade of failures through the flagship. The main cannon overloaded, and the resulting explosion tore through the massive vessel. It broke in half, fires burning through both sections. On defiance, Hyun watched the flagship die and closed his eyes. Another good soldier gone. Another sacrifice for freedom. But Jiwan's sacrifice gave them the opening they needed. The hierarchy fleet, seeing their flagship destroyed, faltered. For the first time in millennia, they felt doubt. The coalition fleet pressed their advantage, pouring fire into the confused enemy formation. The tide was turning, but it was still not enough. The hierarchy had too many ships, too much power. Then something unexpected happened. More ships appeared at the edge of the system. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Species that the hierarchy had conquered and dismissed. They had been watching the battle. Seeing the coalition fight inspired them. They joined the battle, their weapons adding to the chaos. The hierarchy fleet, facing an enemy that would not break and reinforcements that kept arriving, made a decision. They retreated. For the first time anyone could remember, the hierarchy withdrew from battle. Cheers erupted across the coalition fleet. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had actually won. But the cost was terrible. Half the coalition fleet was destroyed. Thousands dead, including Ji-won and countless others. Yura walked through the wreckage afterward, seeing the price of victory written in blood and fire. She found Captain Hyun in the ruins of a destroyed ship, standing beside a memorial wall. Names were being etched into it. So many names. He looked old, tired beyond measure. "We won," Yura said quietly. "We survived," Hyun corrected. "There is a difference. The hierarchy will return. This was just one fleet. They have others. Then we will be ready. You taught us how to fight. You showed us that victims can become warriors." Hyun shook his head. I did not want to teach you to be warriors. I wanted to teach you to be strong enough that you would not need warriors. Yura put a hand on his shoulder. The galaxy is a dark place, Captain. Full of beings like the Kraal and the hierarchy. But it is also full of light. Light like you and your people who cross the stars to help strangers. Devils who fall from the sky to fight demons. 6 months later, the Free Coalition held its founding ceremony in the rebuilt Great Temple on Vareth Prime. Representatives from 50 species gathered, each one formerly conquered, formerly broken. Now they stood as equals. Yura, now known across the galaxy as the Warrior Priestess, helped draft their charter. It was simple and clear. We, the free beings of the galaxy, unite not for conquest but for protection. We will never again be helpless. We will defend those who cannot defend themselves. We will stand against tyranny wherever it appears. And we will remember those who taught us that faith without action is merely hope, and hope alone cannot stop the darkness. A memorial was built for the human dead, thousands of names etched in stone. Captain Hyun's name was there too. He had died 3 months after the battle, his wounds finally taking their toll. But before he died, he had smiled. "We did it," he had whispered. "We gave them hope." Years passed. The coalition grew stronger. The hierarchy attacked twice more. And twice more they were repelled. Other species, seeing that resistance was possible, joined the fight. The galaxy was changing. One day, Doyen, now a captain himself, stood before a class of young warriors. Vareth, humans, Valen, and others. They were eager, excited to fight. He looked at them and remembered all those who had fallen. Soman, Jae, Jiwon, Hyun, so many others. "Before you become warriors," he said, "understand what you are choosing. War is not glorious. Victory is not clean. You will lose friends. You will see horrors. You will do things that haunt you forever. But you fight anyway because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light." He gestured to the memorial outside. "Those names represent people who fell from the sky like devils to save strangers. They fought with terrible fury because they loved with equal passion. That is the legacy you inherit. Not just the skill to fight, but the wisdom to know what is worth fighting for." The students nodded solemnly. They understood, or at least they thought they did. They would learn the truth in time. As Doyen dismissed the class, he looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, human ships were answering another distress call. Devils falling from the sky once more, bringing hellfire to tyrants and hope to the oppressed. And in the great temple, Yura knelt in prayer. But her prayers were different now. She did not pray for salvation from above. She prayed for the strength within. She prayed for the courage to stand. She prayed for the wisdom to know when to fight and when to show mercy. Her faith had died when the Kraal came. It had been reborn in fire and blood, tempered by sacrifice and suffering. She had learned that gods did not save people. People saved themselves with strength and unity and the courage to become what was needed. The galaxy was still dark, still dangerous, still full of beings like the hierarchy who believed might made right. But it was also full of light, light carried by beings who would cross the stars to help strangers, who would fight demons to protect the innocent, who proved that the smallest acts of courage could change everything. Devils no more. Just beings who understood that peace required strength, that faith required action, and that hope alone was not enough. But hope combined with courage, that could change the galaxy.